It was raining, the kind of rain that only happens in Mobile, Alabama. Not falling, but arriving. As if the sky had made a decision, and the ground had no say in the matter. The streets along Dauphin were running like creeks. The gutters were full. The awnings over the storefronts on Royal Street were sagging under the weight of water that had no intention of stopping, and every person on the sidewalk was either running or already wet. She was not running. No, she was standing at the bus stop on the corner of Royal and St. Francis with a black umbrella. The kind with a wooden handle and a curved grip. The kind nobody buys anymore because they cost $40, and people have decided that umbrellas are disposable. She was 23 years old. She was wearing a nurse's uniform, white, creased, the old-fashioned kind with the cap and the stockings and the shoes that squeaked on linoleum, because she worked the evening shift at Mobile Infirmary, and the bus came at 2:15 and the rain had started at 2:03, and she was the only person at the stop who was dry. He was not dry. He was sitting on a motorcycle 30 feet from the bus stop, pulled over beneath an oak tree that provided no shelter at all, because oak trees in a Mobile rainstorm are about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. He was soaked. His leather vest was dark with water. His beard was dripping. His hands were on the grips, and his head was down, and he was not moving. Not because he was waiting for the rain to stop, but because something in the way he sat, hunched, still, heavy, suggested that the rain was not the thing weighing him down. She watched him for about a minute. She watched the rain hit his shoulders and run down the back of his vest in streams. She watched his hands grip and release. Grip and release, the way a man's hands move when his body is trying to process something his mind cannot hold. She did not know him. She did not know what the patches meant. She did not know that the bottom rocker on his vest said Nomad, or that the man's road name was Wire, or that he had just come from a hospital room in Biloxi where his mother had died at 4:17 that morning, holding his hand and saying a name that was not his, saying his brother's name, his dead brother's name, thus the brother who had overdosed in 1983, calling for the wrong son at the end. And Wire had held her hand and said nothing, because what do you say when the person dying in front of you is reaching for someone who is already gone? She did not know any of that. She just saw a man in the rain. She walked to him. She held the umbrella over his head. The rain hit her shoulders and soaked through the white uniform in seconds, the fabric going translucent, the cap wilting, the shoes filling with water. She stood there and held the umbrella over a stranger on a motorcycle, and she did not say a word. And he looked up at her with eyes that were red and swollen, and he did not say a word either. And for a long moment the only sound was the rain hammering the nylon above his head, and the water running in the gutter, and a car passing slow on Royal Street, with its wipers going full speed. Then she said, "You keep this." She put the umbrella in his hand. She closed his fingers around the wooden handle, and never got her name. That was 1987, never got her name. That was 1987. 37 years ago. And what happened in 2024? What brought 90 Hells Angels to a house on Levert Avenue in Mobile, Alabama, in October, carrying something that no one on that street had ever seen before? Started with that umbrella and ended with a truth that this city had been burying since 1991. This is that story. Her name was Ruth Ann Caffey. Born in 1964 in Pritchard, just north of Mobile, in a house with a tin roof that made the rain sound like applause. Her father, Louis, drove a delivery truck for a bakery on Government Street and came home every evening smelling like flour and diesel. Her mother, Odessa, cleaned houses in Spring Hill 6 days a week, and on Sundays played the organ at Greater Hope AME Church with a touch so gentle the notes seemed to arrive on their own, like birds landing on a wire. Ruth was the middle of 5 children, 2 brothers older, 2 sisters younger, and she was the quiet one, the one who sat in the back of the church and listened. the one who ironed her own uniform at 14 because she had decided early that taking care of things was its own form of prayer. Thus, she became a nurse. She worked at Mobile Infirmary for 38 years. She never married. That was the detail people in the neighborhood attached to her, the way a town attaches a single adjective to a person and calls it a biography. Ruth Caffey, the one who never married. As if the absence of a husband was the most interesting thing about a woman who had spent 4 decades holding the hands of strangers at 3 a.m. in rooms, where the only sound was a heart monitor and the only witness was her. She retired in 2022. She was 58. She moved into the house on Levert Avenue that had belonged to her parents, the one with the tin roof, and she tended the garden Odessa had planted 40 years ago. Azaleas along the fence, gardenias by the porch, a fig tree in the back that produced more fruit than Ruth could eat. So she left bags of figs on her neighbors' porches every August without a note because Ruth Caffey did not do things for the recognition. She did them because they needed doing. She had a quiet burden she did not discuss. It was not the unmarried part. It was something else. Something that lived in the house on Levert Avenue the way termites live in a wall. Invisibly, structurally, eating at the foundation while the paint on the outside stays clean. Wire, real name Samuel James Odom, now 61, had carried the umbrella for 37 years. That is not a metaphor. He kept it. The black umbrella with the wooden handle and the curved grip, yet the one she had closed his fingers around in the rain on Royal Street. The one that still smelled, for the first few years, faintly of starch and a perfume he could not name. He kept it in the saddlebag of his first bike, then in the closet of his apartment in Gulfport, then in the spare room of his house in Ocean Springs. He moved 4 times in 37 years, and every time the umbrella went first. He did not open it. He did not use it. So he kept it the way a man keeps a rosary or a coin or a letter, not for its function, but for what it represented, which was the only moment in the worst week of his life, when a stranger chose to get wet so he could stay dry. Wire was not a sentimental man. He was a road captain for the Gulf Coast Nomads. He had a scar along his jaw from a bar in Pascagoula. He had done 4 years at Parchman Farm in the late 90s for a thing he did not discuss, and he had come out quieter and steadier and less interested in proving anything to anyone. He had one rule about debts. They get paid. Everyone. No matter how long it takes. Carol, the woman he eventually married in 2001, a dental hygienist from Hattiesburg who understood that Wire's silences were not empty, but full. She asked him once about the umbrella, and he told her the story, and she said, "You have been carrying that for 15 years, and he said, I will carry it until I can put it down." Carol died in 2019. Aneurysm, instantaneous. She was standing in the kitchen holding a glass of orange juice, and then she was on the floor, and the glass was broken, and the juice was spreading across the tile in a shape that Wire would see in his sleep for years. He buried her in Hattiesburg beside her mother. He rode home to Ocean Springs and sat in the spare room and held the umbrella across his knees and let the grief come. And it came. And it was the same shape as the grief from 1987. The same temperature, the same weight. The same silence that fills a room when the person you need is not there. He started looking for the woman with the umbrella in 2022. He did not know her name. He knew she was a nurse at Mobile Infirmary. He knew she wore the old uniform with the cap. He knew she waited for the 2:15 bus at Royal and St. Francis. He knew it was 1987. That was all. It took him 2 years. He asked brothers in the Mobile chapter. He asked retired nurses. He visited the hospital's human resources office and was told they could not release records from 37 years ago. He found nothing. The trail was too old, too thin. A woman at a bus stop in the rain is not the kind of thing that gets recorded. Then, in the spring of 2024, a brother named Culp who ran a body shop on Airport Boulevard and who knew everyone in Mobile the way mechanics know everyone. Now, through the undercarriage of their cars, mentioned that his mother-in-law had been a patient at Mobile Infirmary in the late 80s and had kept a Christmas card from a nurse named Ruth who had stayed past her shift to hold her hand during a procedure. The card was signed Ruth C., evening shift, with a small drawing of a gardenia in the corner. Wire felt the name land in his chest the way a key lands in a lock. Culp's mother-in-law remembered Ruth Caffey. She remembered the uniform. She remembered the cap. She remembered a woman who stood in the rain at the bus stop because she had given her umbrella to someone and did not have another. Wire had the name. Culp had the address. And that is when Wire learned what was happening on Levert Avenue. Before I tell you what they found, I need to hear from you. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from. And if you have not subscribed yet, hit that button now. Because what was happening to Ruth Caffey, the woman who gave away her umbrella, who worked 38 years holding the hands of strangers, who left bags of figs on porches without a note, is the part of this story that no one in Mobile wanted to see. And it took 90 Hell's Angels to make them look. The house on Levert Avenue was in trouble. Ruth was in trouble. And the source of the trouble had a name that every person in the neighborhood knew and respected. His name was Dean Allen Tate. On the board of the Mobile Area Habitat, for Humanity. He had built a habitat house the previous year, and the newspaper had run a photograph of him handing the keys to a single mother with 2 children. And the photograph was framed in his office beside his contractor's license and a commendation from the Mobile Chamber of Commerce. He had been hired by Ruth Caffey in 2023 to repair the foundation of the house on Levert Avenue. The house was 64 years old. The foundation had settled on the south side, cracking the brick veneer and jamming the back door. It was a $15,000 job. Ruth paid a $7,500 deposit from her retirement savings. Dean Tate did not fix the foundation. He removed the brick veneer on the south wall. He dug exploratory holes along the footer. He installed 4 temporary jacks, and then he stopped. He stopped because stopping was the business model. Dean Tate had spent 12 years running the same play on elderly homeowners in Mobile. Take the deposit, begin the demolition, expose the structure, and then stop. Once the house is opened, the homeowner is trapped. They cannot live in it safely. They cannot hire another contractor to finish a job they do not understand. They can only call Dean, who answers eventually, who apologizes, who promises to return next week, who does not return next week, who sends an invoice for additional materials, who requests another $3,000 to continue, and who stretches the job across months and years, extracting money at each delay, until the homeowner has paid $40,000 for $15,000 worth of work that is still not finished. Ruth had paid $28,000 by the time Wire found her. The south wall of her house was open. The temporary jacks were rusting. The exploratory holes had filled with rainwater. Rain that now came through the exposed foundation and pooled in the crawl space and rose through the floorboards and warped the hardwood in the room where Odessa's organ had sat for 30 years. Ruth had covered the organ with plastic sheeting. She had put buckets under the leaks. She had called Dean Tate 17 times in the last 4 months and had reached him twice. And both times he had said he was coming next week. And both times next week had not come. She did not tell her neighbors because the south wall faced the alley and no one could see it. She did not tell her brothers because they lived in Atlanta and Chicago, and she did not want to worry them. She did not report Dean to the licensing board because Dean sat on the Habitat for Humanity board, and she believed what the neighborhood believed, that Dean Tate was a good man, that the delays were temporary, that the work would get done. She sat in the house with the tin roof and listened to the rain come through the wall and pool on the floor. And the sound was not applause anymore. Wire came to the house on a Wednesday afternoon. He knocked on the door. Ruth answered. She was 60 years old. Her hair was gray now. Her hands were still steady, a nurse's hands, precise, capable. But her eyes had the look of a person who has been solving a problem alone for too long and has run out of solutions. Wire did not mention the umbrella. 7 of them, each one higher than the 7 of them, each one higher than the last, each one for materials that were not on the property and work that had not been done. She showed him the warped floorboards. She showed him the plastic sheeting over Odessa's organ. And when she pulled the corner of the sheeting back, and Wire saw the water stain spreading across the walnut casing, Ruth pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling and breathed. And Wire understood that the organ was not an instrument. It was her mother's hands. It was Sunday morning. It was the last sound in the world that felt safe. He did not raise his voice. He said, "How much has he taken?" $28,000. "How much do you have left?" Ruth did not answer. The answer was on her face. Wire walked the property. He photographed the south wall, the jacks, the holes, the missing materials, the water damage. He measured the work that had been done against the invoices that had been paid. And the gap between those two numbers was $19,000. $19,000 for work that existed only on paper. He charged to a woman who had spent 38 years caring for strangers and who was now watching her mother's house dissolve while a man with a Habitat for Humanity commendation cashed her checks and did not return her calls. Wire called Bishop. Bishop was the chapter president in Mobile now, a man named Louis Green, 56, who had grown up 4 blocks from Levert Avenue, and who remembered Odessa Caffey's organ playing from when he was a boy, sitting on his grandmother's porch on Sunday mornings. Saturday, Wire said. "Bring everyone, and bring tools." They came at 7 a.m. 90 riders plus 32 volunteers, wives, brothers, friends, a retired structural engineer from Pascagoula named Don, and a licensed foundation contractor from Daphne named Maria Costas, who had competed against Dean Tate for jobs and had suspected for years that his business model was extraction, not construction. And they came on motorcycles and in pickup trucks loaded with lumber and concrete and rebar and hydraulic jacks. The sound of 90 Harleys arriving on Levert Avenue at 7 a.m. on a Saturday brought every neighbor to their window. The vibration traveled through the foundations of every house on the block. A tremor that built until the windows rattled and the gardenias along Ruth's fence swayed as if a wind had come from underground. They did not just show up. They built. In 12 hours, 90 Hells Angels and 32 volunteers stabilized the foundation, poured new footers, rebuilt the south wall from the sill plate up, installed moisture barriers, replaced the warped floorboards, and sealed every opening that Dean Tate had left exposed for 15 months. Maria Costas supervised the structural work. Don checked the levels. Brothers who had poured concrete on job sites for 20 years poured concrete. Brothers who had framed houses framed. A woman named Terry from the Biloxi chapter. Ruth stood on the porch and watched. Ruth stood on the porch and watched. She offered to help. She was told to sit down. She offered coffee. 43 people accepted. She made 12 pots between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., carrying them out to the yard on a tray, pouring cups for men and women in leather vests who were covered in concrete dust and sweat. And every time she poured a cup, she said thank you. And every time they said yes, ma'am. And the exchange became a rhythm that carried the day forward, the way a heartbeat carries a body, steady, automatic, alive. Dean Tate drove past at 10 a.m. He slowed down. He saw the trucks. He saw the bikes. He saw the south wall being rebuilt by people who were not him. He did not stop. He drove to his office on Spring Hill Avenue and sat there for 2 hours. And at noon, he received a phone call from the Alabama Home Builders Licensure Board informing him that a formal complaint had been filed. accompanied by 47 photographs, 7 invoices, and a structural engineer's report documenting the gap between work billed and work performed. The complaint had been co-signed by Maria Costas, who had been waiting 12 years for someone to file first. Within 3 weeks, 4 more homeowners in Mobile came forward with identical stories. Deposits taken, a demolition begun, work abandoned, invoices inflated. The total across 5 cases was $187,000. Dean Tate's license was suspended. The Mobile County District Attorney's Office opened a criminal investigation for contractor fraud and elder financial exploitation. His Habitat for Humanity board seat was vacated. The framed photograph of him handing keys to the single mother was quietly removed from the newspaper's archive, not because the gesture was false, but because the man behind it was. At 5 p.m., when the last nail was driven and the last bag of concrete mix was emptied and the south wall of the house on Levert Avenue was whole again, for the first time in 15 months, Wire walked up the porch steps. Ruth was sitting in Odessa's rocking chair. The plastic sheeting was off the organ. The floor was dry. The tin roof above her head was doing what it had always done, turning the sound of rain into something that felt like home. Wire reached into the saddlebag he had carried from Ocean Springs. He pulled out the umbrella. Black. Wooden handle. Curved grip. 37 years old. The nylon was faded. The metal ribs had a patina of rust at the joints. The handle was smooth from being held, from being carried, from being moved from closet to closet across 4 decades by a man who could not put it down until he found the woman who had put it in his hands. He held it out to her. "Royal Street," he said. 1987, and it was raining. You were in a white uniform. You held this over my head and you got soaked and you got on the bus and I never saw you again." Ruth looked at the umbrella. She reached out and touched the handle. The same curved grip, the same smooth wood. 37 years older. 37 years carried. Her hand closed around it. Her chin dropped. Her shoulders, which had been carrying the house and the money and the organ and the rain and all of it, he lowered for the first time in longer than she could remember. "I thought you were sad," she said. "I did not know what else to do." "You did enough," Wire said. "You did more than enough. And I have owed you for 37 years. And this," he gestured at the house, the wall, the trucks, the riders packing up their tools in the yard, "is the only way I know how to say it." He reached into his vest pocket. He pulled out a small enamel pin, black, shaped like an umbrella, no bigger than a thumbnail. "Our family," he said. "That is not a word, our family," he said. "That is not a word I use to be polite. It means I will come back." Ruth held the pin. She held the umbrella. She sat in Odessa's rocking chair on the porch of a house that was whole again. And the October air smelled like concrete and sawdust and gardenias and the particular sweetness of figs that have fallen and split open on warm ground. Across the street, a woman named Beverly Banks stood on her porch. Beverly had lived on Levert Avenue for 22 years. She attended Dauphin Way Baptist with Dean Tate. She had recommended Dean to Ruth. She had said, with her hand on Ruth's arm, "He is good people, Ruth. He built a Habitat house." She had said that, and she had believed it. And now she was standing on her porch, watching a woman she had known for 2 decades sit in a rocking chair holding an umbrella that was older than Beverly's marriage, surrounded by the evidence of what good people actually looks like. And Beverly Banks understood for the first time that she had sent her neighbor into the hands of a man whose goodness was a billboard and whose business was theft. Beverly walked across the street. She did not apologize with words. She sat in the chair beside Ruth, and she stayed there until dark. And the staying was the apology. And Ruth accepted it the way she accepted everything. Quietly, completely, without requiring it to be more than it was. 3 months later, Ruth Caffey's house was featured in the Mobile Press Register, not for the fraud, but for the repair. The article described 90 Hells Angels rebuilding a nurse's foundation in 12 hours. It did not use the word charity. It used the word debt. Whilst the journalist, a woman named Simone, had interviewed Wire, who told her the umbrella story, and Simone wrote a sentence that Ruth cut out and taped to the refrigerator. 37 years ago, a nurse held an umbrella over a stranger. On Saturday, the stranger held a roof over her. The umbrella hangs on a hook inside Ruth's front door now, beside Odessa's rain hat and Louis's old bakery cap. The pin is on the collar of Ruth's gardening jacket, the one she wears every morning when she tends the azaleas and the gardenias and the fig tree. She still leaves bags of figs on her neighbors' porches in August. She still does not leave a note. Wire rides through Mobile once a month. He takes Dauphin Street to Royal, past the bus stop at St. Francis, where a woman stood in the rain 37 years ago. He does not stop. He just rides past, slow, and if Ruth is on the porch, she raises one hand and he nods, and that is enough. Some debts take 37 years to pay. Some kindnesses echo so far forward that the person who threw the stone has forgotten the water. But the water remembers. The ripple remembers. And sometimes it comes back as 90 motorcycles and a rebuilt wall and an umbrella returned to the hand that gave it away. So let me ask you this. What did you give away that you forgot about? What small thing? An umbrella? A dollar? A sentence? And a moment of standing in the rain, so someone else did not have to, man. Did you offer without thinking, without expecting, without ever imagining that it might come back? Hit the like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because Ruth Ann Caffey understood something at 23 years old on a sidewalk in Mobile, Alabama, that most people never learn at all. You do not give because it will come back. You give because someone is sitting in the rain. And if it comes back as 90 engines on a Saturday morning and a wall rebuilt, and a pin shaped like an umbrella, and a man who carried your kindness for 37 years because he could not put it down, then that is not luck. That is what happens when the world finally catches up to what you already knew.